I just can't quit you, babe. Like, let's make this work. Is that going to be the first call?
Yeah, I'm going to put on some Kenny Loggins or something and maybe just, Welcome to the Marketing Team of One podcast, where we have conversations about the issues one-person marketing teams face when trying to meet their goals with limited time and budgets. Now here's your hosts, Eric and Mike.
Eric, you're coming in hot today. What is going on?
I know. So many of these start this way, and it must seem like I'm completely mental, but, there's just a lot of difficult things that happen. We're under a lot of pressure, and sometimes these vendors that we work with, like, can we just be professional? Like, just do your job. Like, I have to babysit them sometimes, and I have to go through all these motions and the rigmarole, and come on, man, like, just do it. That's the sign on the front of your building. It says you do this. Do this.
I know, guys.
Yeah.
Do we need some legs broken?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to make that call.
So you're just like, you're done.
On the day that things happen, I'm done. I am like out the door, like throwing this in the garbage. We are done. Never talking to this person again. You have done me wrong on so many levels. I'm giving up. I'm spiritually done.
Time to fire him.
Well, maybe I'm impatient.
Okay.
I know that doesn't sound like me. I'm a saint.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. You work with me every day.
Yep.
Perfection embodied, pretty much, right?
Yep.
Never really make a wrong step.
Never.
Thank you. That's on camera, by the way. Maybe it's one of those things where I just assume that you say you do this, and we order that, and then what I get is not really this. It's that. And that doesn't make us happy and the client's mad, So we got to, like, twist it around and go back and redo and spend more money or resources or time or things like that. So it's just frustrating, But, you make a good point. I mean, this was a new vendor. Maybe I need to have a little bit more grace.
Person's messing up. Like, we should, do we just cut them loose? Should we be patient and let it go? Like, where are you at?
Nerves are right on the edge, right on the top layer here.
Yeah.
So this is a rough time. Yeah, they're done. I'm fired. They're fired. I'm done. Never working with them again. But my soul reaches out and says, slow down a little bit. You're a little emotional over this because this is now a live thing going on that's disturbing, hard to be involved in. But this isn't the first time that's happened with other vendors. And so I guess thinking back to it, it's like, well, don't throw it all away. Maybe there's some value in here, and I need to look for that. And maybe when I wake up tomorrow and I meditate, maybe I'll find grace. Yeah. Right now, I'm not. But I think there will be a time when I go back and revisit, maybe with less emotion, and just kind of analyze it. Because in the past, we've had vendors, and I have to say, it can be fairly common at the beginning of those relationships. Learning how to work with other people is challenging, and there's steps that you need to take to maybe optimize that.
There's you have to allow room for the, what do you mean you don't know what was in my head, and maybe I didn't communicate as perfectly as possible to you in the beginning? First instinct, you've done me dirty. I'm not working with you ever again.
Right.
But you could see a scenario where it might be worth the work right now with the patience and the work to work with this vendor, because that with some of our more successful ones, right, we've had a lot of success because the long-term relationship over multiple projects ends up having a lot of benefits, right?
Yeah, and maybe it's part of that that specific vendor makes that mistake consistently all the time on those first engagements, and then once you get into those relationships and you've worked through that process, this has happened where it's like all of a sudden now they're your best friend because they can actually deliver and you or they have turned it around. And by no means is this some sort of a testament that everybody's wrong and I'm always right. I have to keep on myself all the time to learn this stuff and keep communicating and clarifying and give context to things every time we hand stuff over to a vendor. So that it's getting to the point where you just have to do that every time and it's a habit. I make a lot of assumptions all the time. Anybody who works with me probably knows that, right, Mike?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on,
I think to be fair, everyone does that.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's your approach to like seeing outside of yourself a little bit when in those vendor relationships to think that, you know what, wow, based on my memory of all this stuff, they really messed up. But memory can sometimes be a faulty kind of narrator, right? Like maybe there's some parts of the equation that missed, like, and if you can look back, I almost always take the other approach was like, I think I messed that up. Yeah. Like I must not have told them this, or this, And I think if you go into those things and kind of realize that it could be both, I'm not immediately digging through my drawer looking for receipts to say like, I sent you this, I sent you this, I sent you this. Like, how did you mess this up? There's a time and place for that, of course, but not right away.
Yeah, when dollar bills are involved, that's when I start to go look for that stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of benefits in letting it ride a little bit and putting up with some of the short-term pain and working through that with the vendor. But like, what do you think some of those benefits are?
Well, again, we're all people and nobody's perfect and everybody has their flaws and they hear things and remember things very differently than you do. So I think what's important is just to kind of hit the foundation, the fundamentals right out of the box, just share with them as much as you can about the project, the outlines, the deadlines, the theme, the idea, sometimes you got to draw pictures, show pictures. We do that all the time. Or make things, mini versions of things and show them like, this is what I want, 50 of these, right?
Especially if you're working with visual people, graphic designers, or, people building web pages, right? Words alone are not going to do that.
No.
You're going to run into some big problems. Scribble on a napkin is going to be way better than words. Yeah.
And sometimes that's part of the project is sitting and explaining and clarifying for everybody exactly what it is. But having those kind of fundamental things obviously up front, record as many of those meetings as you possibly can. Check out Fathom. It's a wonderful product.
So this situation is really annoying, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Man, like, just, like you said, it's on the door. Do what's on the door. Do what you say you do. But so like, while it's really frustrating right now, like, what are the benefits of like working on this and seeing this more as a speed bump and not the end of a relationship?
Well, yeah, that's really good because we have some awesome vendors that we've worked with for decades. They're just awesome people and have bent over backwards for us all the time, and they're our go-to. That's eventually what you hope. And maybe that's my frustration sometimes is we have all these great vendors, and then when we go out to get new vendors for different services or new services, why isn't it like that? Why, there's like, you should be like that person. Come on, just do it like they do it,
Yeah.
But that's the problem is like, you can't get to that point just with one project or even two projects sometimes. So the benefit is that you really do have these, you enjoy working with those people. So you love picking up the phone and calling them and talking to them because they make you laugh or it's just you have that kind of camaraderie involved in it. Because sometimes some of these vendors that we work with, we've been in the trenches with them, like grinding it out late nights, the whole thing, picking it up, delivering, we're
So
in
is
there
this
helping 'em.
situation right now, do you see this as one of those grinded out type things that'll build to a stronger thing?
It could be, yeah, I think so, because it's frustrating because at the beginning you get frustrated over what you perceive as the simplest things that shouldn't be. Why is this a challenge? This shouldn't be a challenge. Like, just,
There's that just word again.
I know, I love it.
You've worked through some battles with people,
Yeah.
but I think there's some repetition there, right? Like what you're implying is some repetition with you've worked on multiple things with those vendors.
Yeah, you build like a pattern
Yeah.
of behavior with that client or with that vendor because you develop a shorthand in a sense. Like you can just say 2 words and it fills their head with all these details and your head with all these details that you then don't have to describe again. You can remember like that that thing we did? Oh yeah, okay. He's starting to schedule it. She's starting to plan for it, whatever. There's just this operation that automatically starts to take place where you're not starting from scratch. Like day 1, we want this. Day 2, you need to do this. Like that's all taken care of in a sense.
It's kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking it's similar to an inside joke you might have with some old like friends, right? Like where you could meet them 15 years later and you could mention that inside joke and they're right back where they were. They know exactly what it was. You don't have to explain anything and they can just take off and run with it. Whereas maybe the spouse or whatever of the person you're talking to, you try and tell them that, they're like, I need more details.
Yeah, and it's like at the beginning of when you first did that thing with that vendor, it may take hours to sit.
Yeah.
No, we need it like that. No, try it. If you could, can I give you a different file? Like what's going to help for your system? Because every vendor probably has a slightly different system. Is there a way we can help optimize? You're working out a lot of those things that you need to take care of before you prep them for success in a sense. So there's work that I need to do, there's work that they need to do, and all that stuff probably takes a lot of hashing out over time. But that's right. It's like an inside joke. Then you go back to them and you're like, we're going to do that thing again. Okay.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Yep. Like right now, it's all about like, let's just cut them loose. This is ridiculous, right? But like, meditate, sleep on it. Patience may prevail, right? And in some cases, that patience would be rewarded.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It sounds like your approach is softening. What are some things we could do to make this better? Build that long-term relationship with this vendor.
Clarify as much as you can up front with all the project details with them. You probably want to have a meeting, I'm sure, to outline things. It's hard to write it all down probably in an email. And then they're going to have questions, so they're going to want to come back and ask you those questions. So I would recommend just going into a meeting with them and then sharing stuff before the meeting so they can review it. If you need to record the meeting, that's even great. So they've got something extra to go on with their questions involved in that as well. So timelines, schedules, budgets, obviously all that stuff needs to be clarified right up front. But we also make visuals like comps and little models and drawings and sketch it out or draw with our fingers. Or the idea, I think, is that you need to communicate it in about 3 different ways sometimes, I feel, especially if it's a complex. I find myself explaining something and trying to explain it from 3 different perspectives, maybe from their perspective or my perspective, but then maybe the client's perspective as well, and drill, like pull back on the whole project and say, at the end of the day, they want to walk into this room and see X or have this to hand over or look at this on screen or whatever it is. So, just starting with, sometimes it's funny, talking with vendors sometimes, if I pull back to that most basic level of what are we doing here, it's like the whole thing when you go in for surgery and you're having your leg amputated. The doctor comes in and he draws a big Sharpie on your leg. Like, this is remove this leg.
Over communicate everything and leave no stone unturned. As you're looking at where we're at today with this vendor, do you think like maybe there's some stuff we could have done to over communicate a little bit better?
I think the mistake I make all the time is that assumption thing, where
Yeah.
I assume that you know what I mean when I say X.
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, I do. Perfect. No problem. I
Yeah.
know exactly what that is. And their version is over here, and your version is over here.
Because, you're coming at it like they're coming in cold from something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've been immersed in it for a little bit longer. Yeah.
That
it's
recency
totally.
bias thing plays way into this.
Totally.
You know, like, come on, we just did this.
Do you have any other tips or kind of frameworks that you lean on for
Yeah, I
some
mean,
of these things?
I try to do my best to provide as much context to the project. So that's that kind of pull back, look, here's the big picture of everything. So you give it that context. Be very clarifying, clarify. So context, clarify. That's a back and forth, questions. You know, that's where I also get into that, like, say it 3 times kind of a thing, where it may take a little extra time and it may take a little extra work to get them to understand it. But sometimes people need to hear things. Like, I know for me, like, you know, you work with me all the time, Mike. You need to tell me, 7 times before I remember anything, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I think if we peeled back the data on that, it would be pretty close to that. Yeah.
Might be 9, might be 11.
Yeah.
Maybe 25, but yeah, it's more than just once sometimes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Once is never enough.
My head's a sieve, basically.
Well, and I'm saying that for myself too. Like, you tell me once.
But then confirm. And by confirm, you just ask per people, like, okay, explain to me back what I just said. You know, not
Yeah.
in a, you know.
There's probably there's
Maybe
there's
that's
a
a
number
little
of different
harsh.
ways to kind of like. Were you even listening to me? What did I say?
Just tell me right now, what did I say?
All right, we're leaving this meeting. What's our action items? Okay, who's working on what? You know, that's another way of kind
Yeah.
of doing the same confirmation, right?
Yeah.
There's communication, but then there's also the doing. Like, do you have any pearls of wisdom? Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, time frames come into play, and that's, you know, that's the hard part, is like getting things scheduled and making sure that everybody has enough time to do what they want to do. I always try to under promise a little bit and then over deliver. What that means is I promise you that I'll get you those files on Wednesday, and then I deliver Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon.
I think that there is a challenge there, right? If you're spinning a bunch of plates, right? Like, your instinct might be to tell the vendor what you want them to hear, like, hey, I'll get this stuff to you. But I think what you're saying is, like, you have to plan for that. There's things that you don't know. So it's better to communicate to that vendor that, hey, I might have this to you by next week, and if you can finish it by the end of this week, but like, give yourself the time to deliver on time.
You need to build the foundation of a positive relationship as much as possible. And then doing it at the beginning of that project just goes a lot further and getting more goodwill around the whole experience.
It's setting expectations and hitting expectations.
Right. We have vendors that do that a lot. And that's
Yeah.
why we have those relationships with them, because they've practiced that all the time. So they're, like I said, it's two-way. We have to deliver things to the vendor that the vendor works on to get back to us or to the client. And so it's important for everybody to kind of practice that so that nobody's surprised as much as possible. You know, most projects we have are not that cutthroat in their deadlines and budgets, and, you know, we do high quality work. We expect our vendors to do high quality work, and that takes a little bit of time. So we have that built into our process and our timeline and the expectations. So it does work well.
We're committed to trying to make this work. There's going to be benefits to trying to make this work, but
There's a pinprick of shining light. If I squint, I can see it. And
what's your mindset of what are you asking them? What are you trying to get them to do to make it right?
well, it's first thing is to identify it as quickly as possible, and ideally that, you know, before a deadline or right as soon as something happens. Maybe a piece of equipment breaks. You know, nobody's in charge of that. Like, I mean, some of these things that we work on have a lot of people involved in them, and they need to plan and schedule and get things set right so that their team is on board with it and understands it too. So identifying it as soon as possible and get everybody in the room so that we can discuss there's probably going to have to be a sacrifice or some sort of compromise going into this. And that's where you need to work with your vendor to try to figure that out first, to see if there's a way to still meet what the expectations are right away. But then if they can't, what's the compromise? There needs to be a compromise that's established as quickly as possible. And the reason that we work with the great vendors that we do now is when there has been problems, and there's always problems, they come to us right away, and they usually have a solution for it right away too. So that's a huge thing. If there's just hands up in the air like, I don't know, it's broke,
Yeah. How a vendor responds when things go wrong is a good testament to whether it is working with them and pushing through this, right? Like you going to this vendor right now and trying to figure out how we're going to make this right and how things are going to get fixed. The response to that is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like if they're going to deflect and end everything, that's a good sign that maybe that light at the end of the tunnel that you're striving for maybe isn't as achievable as you thought.
Snuffed out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think some of that may be mitigated at the front end of the conversation when we first start talking to that vendor. Levels of communication. How often do we talk? How often do you tell me things? There's a pretty standard set, here's the deadlines, here's all the milestones, let me know when things are going. Now it's going to the bindery, or now it's, going to production. Okay, great. Thank you for the update. Those are really great. There's also, though, on the other side of that, where there's too many updates or too many questions. We tend to run into those kind of issues when maybe we haven't done a good job of clarifying with that vendor, okay, we would like this pace of communication. There's ways to kind of establish things like, what is that pace of communication that doesn't drive the project? Because, all those cycles just take time away from doing other things, and we're busy people.
How this vendor responds to problems and how they is a big indicator of how you would work with them. When do you work through that? When's it time to move on? Like, do you have any feel for when it's like, nope, we're done?
I think it's a pretty complicated matrix of things that you need to consider. It's not just maybe one thing. It's looking at the full, what's the final product? Was everybody happy and satisfied? Okay, so that's a big part of it. We need to kind of calculate that into the equation. That weights pretty heavily. Is it something that can be resolved? Or is this something that can never be resolved? And that gets into that decision making of, well, if I just do this at X, Y, and Z at the beginning, maybe that will help mitigate all these things that happen later on in the project. Do you like working with them? Are they happy? Are they helpful? Are they proactive? All that goes into it as well then, and you need to kind of develop your own level of, what are you going to put up with kind of stuff.
What are some asks that you could make of this person that you feel are good concessions? What are some things that you wouldn't ask that maybe we've been asked? Are there some things that you could, in trying to make this right?
Yeah, and
so you feel satisfied.
Yeah, and some of this probably comes down to, there's financial incentives, whether it's like, give me that for free, or this part of it for free, or maybe a free delivery or something could be something that would help. If we're talking project-specific stuff, oftentimes it is around those things. Can I get a discount?
Or something.
It's like going to a restaurant, if you don't like the food. Is this an investment you want to make in a relationship that if you feel really, really good about it, sometimes I'll eat some of the problems. I'll eat maybe a schedule, or I may, eat some of the financial parts of it as well. But understanding that it's an investment in, I've got the confidence that this is a vendor that I want to work with over and over and over again. And if we were to just fix these 2 or 3 things that were probably my fault, we wouldn't have these issues. So I'll take the blame, or I'll take the bullet on that one a little bit. So,
would you ever ask for the final delivery in free of charge?
That's the nuclear option, man. That seems really...
I can't even imagine doing that. maybe it's because we are on the vendor side on things. No matter what happened, there was effort put in.
Yeah.
There would be some gross negligence.
Yeah.
Because at that point, whatever you'd get out of it is probably unusable anyways, right?
In the past, we've approved colors. Everything looks great. They start running it. It looks great off the press, the first 100 sheets. And then we leave. We're like, okay, we trust. It's good. Your equipment's up to snuff. And then the printer prints out 30,000 more, and that 29,000th thing looks terrible because something went haywire in the equipment. They went through bindery and it got delivered and the client got it. And then, of course, the first one they pick up, the client looks at it and is like, what the heck happened to this thing? It looks terrible. And you're like, what are you talking about? It was proved. So in that sense, we've had to have printers go back and reprint the whole job or a majority of it. So we've still paid for the printing.
Yeah.
But they have eaten the cost of all of the reprints. The problem there is that then we lose time. And if it's time critical, then there's a problem. Of course, all those things work into it. So that I guess in that sense, that's the nuclear option when it comes to printing. But you have to be realistic and understand that, there's probably a chance that maybe you're part of why things went wrong. And that's where I give a lot of grace sometimes.
Is that where you're landing today? That you came in hot, and why can't you just do your job?
Well,
is that where you're landing today? Or are you going to give you?
You've done a good job of being my therapist, Mike. I'm starting to see the light spiritually. I think I'm open to considering that.
Still a little hot under the collar.
Yeah,
but
come on. Yeah.
But there's enough good.
I think there's enough good, and the end product, will, if everything works out, is going to be amazing, and everybody will be happy.
Yeah.
And everybody will forget it. That's the other thing, is just move on. I mean, if you come to a compromise, things are fixed, have a bad memory and just move on.
Yeah.
If things are all good and everybody's happy, you don't need to keep dwelling on it or remember it for sure. Don't hold grudges, but learn from it. And that's where you also have to, if I'm going to work with this vendor, do I have to keep reminding them of these things every time we do a project together? And if that's the case, then I would argue that you might want to just...
That's when you start going through the pain with another vendor for the long-term
and hopefully
things, right?
They don't need to be babysat as much. Yes.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
So I can see you leaving this meeting, just kind of picking up your phone going, I just can't quit you, babe. Let's make this work. Is that going to be the first call?
Yeah, I'm going to put on some Kenny Loggins or something and maybe just, I think that, it's healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something.
Good Kenny Loggins playlist will do a lot of people right.
Rock, just kind of get into the peace mode, a little bit. Yeah, maybe I need to make right with them. I get emotional about stuff, and it's hard. I think I don't tend to yell often, do I, Mike?
Not as much as me.
Okay. So
I'm just thinking I have some choice words that are said at loud volumes every once in a while. It's never directed at any one person directly.
As he points to me.
Right. I did not mean it that way. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I didn't take it personally at all. That's good. That's the good point.
Yeah.
So, moving on, Mike. I'm moving on.
Moving on. Building that bridge.
Yes.
For a long, happy relationship.
I can't wait.
Whew. We've moved mountains here today.
Look at me. I'm smiling. I'm happy. I'm jovial.
Just think.
Yeah.
That was not the case when we started.
No,
so.
I was on the edge of tears.
Yeah.
I was ready to pounce. Ready to go.
Success!
Appreciate you talking me off the ledge, Mike. I feel a lot better.
Good. I'm here anytime. Oh, our hour's up.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information and other episodes, subscribe to the Marketing Team of One podcast on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcast networks. You can also chat with us on the r/Marketing Team of One subreddit or visit marketingteamofone.com to learn more.